Scarlet Harvest is a retro sci-fi shooter I'm making in the Easy FPS Editor game engine. Though it's been so long since my last update, you'd be forgiven for thinking I'd cancel the project. Don't worry, I haven't. Whilst I did put it down for a time, I've now been working hard on the next iteration of Scarlet Harvest for several months, and I'm finally ready to start sharing my progress. So, let's begin, shall we? The original 3-level slice of Scarlet Harvest was made in 3 months for a horror game contest run by my friends. That had been enough time to learn the basics of Easy FPS Editor and make a couple of weapons, enemies, and environment assets. The 3 development vlogs I made about this process did surprisingly well. Your feedback on both the videos and the game were hugely encouraging. I made a list of bug reports and suggestions. Several people, for example, had noticed how weird the arms look on the shotgun.
What is that? What the fuck is that?
A consequence of using FPS Creator arms on the original model. So I knew I'd eventually have to remodel that shotgun. But instead, I toyed around with ideas for a level set on the city streets, and one set in a London Underground station. Unfortunately, I also had a lot going on in my real life at that time, not least of which was starting a new job in the games industry, kinda. Rather than get completely burnt out, I decided to pause work on Scarlet Harvest to focus on these other areas of my life. In March, my new job took me to San Francisco to cover GDC. Naturally, I made a whole video about me exploring the city, which you can watch on my second channel. But more than that, meeting other devs started to get me excited about my own game again. But it was at this point I was faced with a dilemma. I really did need to redo that shotgun, but I knew that there were much more fundamental issues with Scarlet Harvest that needed addressing first. For the original version of Scarlet Harvest, I hadn't really given much thought to the overall story or the characters. I just wanted to try a new engine. But if I now wanted to realise a full game, by which I mean something longer than 3 or 4 levels, I needed to go back to square one and decide what this game was actually about. I did something I've never done before. I started a design doc, so I could list out all the characters, enemies and weapons in my game and plot out a storyline. But how do you write a storyline for a game? For me, I used the same process I'd use if I was writing a film script. Every budding film student is familiar with Sid Field. He's best known for developing a paradigm for film narratives to help writers develop their ideas into saleable screenplays and help producers assess their potential. The paradigm divides a narrative into 3 acts. Act 1 is the setup. It's usually the first 25% of the film and establishes characters, setting, and tone, and usually starts with an inciting incident, something to kick off the story. The action builds to a plot point, a pivotal moment from which there is no return. It's usually when the main character makes a choice, like in Star Wars when Luke decides to leave Tatooine with Obi-Wan.
I want to learn the ways of the Force and become a Jedi like my father.
Act 2 is the middle 50% of your story. It's all about confrontation, the characters attempting to solve the problem but being thwarted. In Vertigo, this is where Scotty tries to uncover the mystery behind Madeline's wanderings. Often at the midpoint of the story, there's some kind of turning point or revelation. In The Shawshank Redemption, for example, this is when Andy starts to rebel against authority by playing the opera music over the PA. It signifies the main character starting to change. Around the 75% mark, Act 2 ends with another plot point. Sometimes this comes in the form of a false victory, like in Ben-Hur, where the main character thinks they've won, only to suffer their greatest defeat yet.
They're not dead. Where are they?
Now, in Act 3, they have to dig deep and face their toughest test. Sometimes the main character will need to complete their transformation, overcoming something that's been holding them back. Sometimes a pivotal character will need to sacrifice themselves for the greater good, as in Saving Private Ryan. The story ends with a new equilibrium having been established. Our characters, or the world they inhabit, is forever changed. Although it was originally designed for films, it can apply to game narratives too. Take Half-Life 2. You've got a first act that establishes the world under the control of the oppressive Combine and introduces the main characters. Act 1 builds to a confrontation with the Chopper, where you finally escape the city. Act 2 sees you tested as you travel through Ravenholm and along the coast to Nova Prospect, whereupon you and Alex are betrayed by Mossman. That's plot point 2. Act 3 sees you fight through the city to the Citadel, where you confront Mossman and take on your biggest test, destroying the Combine Relay. Or what about Bioshock, where Act 1 establishes Rapture and its sickly inhabitants, Act 2 sees you methodically track down Ryan, only for a major twist to be revealed about who the real antagonist is. Then Act 3 sees you confront them and reap the consequences of your choices throughout the game. If you're enjoying this video so far, give this video a like, or subscribe so you don't miss my next video. Sid Fiord's story paradigm isn't designed to be a rigid framework you always follow completely, but it can help suggest how you pace your story to remain engaging. So with this in mind, I drew up a paradigm that plotted out the alien invasion plot and how our main character and Reva, the snarky comm specialist who helps him, will have to work together to overcome that threat. At the same time, I had to make sure the story I was writing could be told with the tools I had. That meant keeping in mind Easy FPS Editor's own limitations as an engine. Its simplicity comes at a cost. AI possibilities are limited. The physics are basic. Even video is only just about supported thanks to a community-made tool. This put constraints on what I could feasibly accomplish in terms of gameplay and storytelling. I made a list of enemies which could challenge the player in different ways, and a list of weapons which could each offer slightly different tactical options. But more on that in my next video. I also listed out locations I thought might make for cool settings for levels. Finally, I pulled everything together, creating a table which set out every level in the game, where it will be set, what enemies and weapons the player will encounter along the way, and what story beats needed to be covered. At last, I had a blueprint for a full game. 14 levels by my reckoning, though 3 of them are somewhat optional depending on if I've got the stamina to complete them. It felt good having a solid plan in place from the outset, something I could reference for what to do next and where I was heading. But now I needed to actually start addressing some of the issues with my previous build of the game. In other words, it was time to fix that bloody shotgun. Next time, I'll cover how I created 8 unique weapons for my game. Make sure you subscribe and hit the bell icon to get notified as soon as that video drops, and feel free to check out the previous version of Scarlet Harvest over on itch. Thanks for watching.